I'm going to go ahead and call this October 2nd, 2017 council meeting to order. And at the very beginning, I would like to have and ask for a moment of silence, if we could, to remember those killed and wounded in last night's violent and senseless shooting in Las Vegas. Our hearts go out to those whose loss and pain is beyond our comprehension. Your loss is our loss, and your pain is our pain. I'd like to ask Bruce Booty to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, Bruce. At this time, I would like to invite Chief Page, Assistant Chief Kelch, Mike Zorn, Cole Lackey, Cole Hadley, Captain Joe Rendell, and Officer Trey Nassett to the podium, please. Wherever you're most comfortable, right up in front. I am profoundly honored to recognize the extraordinary service rendered by firefighters Mike Zorn, Cole Lackey, Cole Hadley, Captain Joe Rendell, and Officer Trey Nassett. Their prompt and professional action and life-saving skills prevented an even greater tragedy and potential fatality and loss of life when they responded to a June 24th boating accident on Whitefish Lake. I'd like to share with you, which I'd left at Thank you. I knew that was going to happen. I'd like to share with you Police Chief Dial's August 28, 2017 memo to the Mayor and Council describing those events. On June 24, 2017, at approximately 18:39 hours, Whitefish firefighters Joe Rendell, Mike Zorn, Cole Lackey, Cole Hadley, and Whitefish police officer Trey Nassett responded to a boating accident on Whitefish Lake near Houston Point. A man visiting from Canada had received life-threatening injuries to his feet after he entered the water from the boat he was riding in. The operator of the boat was unaware his passenger had entered the water and was hanging on the side of the boat when the driver put the boat in reverse and the passenger's feet were struck by the boat propeller. Whitefish fire and police personnel responded with the fireboat and located the boat near Houston Point. The injured man was transferred from the boat to the fireboat, where Whitefish first responders rendered life-saving treatment to the man who was bleeding profusely and was in and out of consciousness. Had it not been for the quick response to the scene and the life-saving measures these men administered, the man may have died. It is my understanding that the man is recovering from his injuries. The professionalism and dedication of these four men displayed is to be commended. I respectfully request that the City Council recognize these individuals for their heroism and dedication to their profession, and I would add, to the community of Whitefish. We already know that Whitefish's first responders are the best of the best, but now we have irrefutable proof. And I would like Chief Page and Assistant Chief Kelch, if you would like to say a few words, please do so.
It's a very proud moment for the police department, the fire department. I know these men working together, the cooperation and coming forward when seconds matter. They don't train often together. I think it's something we can look for the future to train more, but their reaction, their quick response, and their dedication to their service of the community and our visitors speaks volumes here today. So congratulations, gentlemen. We're proud of you.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you guys. I'm very proud of you. And it's nothing different than what gets done every day by both the police and firefighters in this town. There's numerous life-saving opportunities that we take, and these guys do a wonderful job all the time. But definitely want to congratulate you tonight on this award. Thank you.
So, it is my great honor, and I'll just start right here with Cole Lackey. Cole, congratulations. Job well done. Cole Hadley. And to you, sir, a job well done. Oh, thank you. Mike Zorn. Yet again, nice job. Thank you very much. Joe? Your leadership, and I appreciate it. Trey, thank you very much for your help and assistance on the scene, and we can't thank you I'd be remiss if I didn't offer all five of you a chance to speak at the podium, if you'd like, but my guess is it's all cool, right? No. Thanks again. And thanks to your families and friends who are here this evening as well. From the looks of it, I think we had the entire shift here tonight, so that's way cool. This is the time set aside for the public to comment on items that are either on the agenda but not a public hearing, or on items not on the agenda. And we would normally respond, but we may consider any comments and remarks later on during councilor comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak this evening and address the council? Now is your chance. Your opportunity in this great democracy of ours. Seeing none, we'll ask, are there any volunteer boards here tonight that wish to comment? How about from council? I have just one, and that is that some of you may be seeing around town, and you may see it in other places, a climate action plan survey postcard. I encourage folks to fill that out and get it back to the city. The purpose of this is so that we can see and at least make sure that we're still on the right track and considering the appropriate items in this plan, and if not, this gives us enough time to make some timely adjustments. Anybody else? Seeing none. That brings us to item 6, the consent agenda. It's on page, starts on page 15 with the minutes, and I'll need a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Sweeney, seconded by Councilor Franzen. All those in favor? And it passes unanimously. Tonight we have 5 public hearings, and the first of which will be our resolution 17-45, a resolution establishing an administrative processing fee for special event permits, and that is from our city attorney. Your staff report.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and councilors. My staff report begins on page 310 of the packet. And as you are all aware, on August 21st of this year, the City Council passed Ordinance 1723 on second reading. And that ordinance amended our ordinance governing special events permits. And as part of that ordinance, section 74-7-A of the ordinance provides that the city manager will charge an applicant for a special event permit. An administrative processing fee is established by the City Council by resolution. And to back up a little bit with, the courts have held that while governments can't profit from imposing licensing fees, they can charge a fee intended to cover the administrative cost of issuing a permit. And for us as a city, that administrative cost is primarily just staff time spent reviewing the application. We had, under the former version of the statute, charged a fee for special events permit, but it was based on almost the size of the event. And again, the administrative processing fee is just really intended to cover our staff time for, doing the community service of basically reviewing these applications. So basing it on the size of the event didn't really seem very reasonable to us, because it kind of takes the same amount of staff time to review an application, no matter how big the event is or whether or not it's recurring. So I asked those employees who are involved in processing the permit to estimate the time that they spend on an average permit. And then I took their hourly rate and basically came up with an administrative fee of, it was about $110,000, or $110,000, oh my gosh. We're not charging that. $110. So this is pretty close to what the events formerly described as recurring events or larger events were paying. I think they were paying $125, and the nonprofits were paying about $100. So it shouldn't be a significant change from what those event organizers have seen before. So there's likely no significant financial impacts. Again, we're just reimbursing city staff for the time that they spend on these, and it's pretty close to what people were paying under the previous version of our ordinance. So unless you have any questions, we respectfully recommend that the City Council adopt the resolution.
Any questions from council? Yes.
So would there be any pay slide for nonprofits?
We didn't build in any pay slide for nonprofits, simply because, again, it's just reimbursing staff for their time, and the staff spends the same amount of time if it's a nonprofit as they do if it's a for-profit. Mm-hmm. And Katie, under the previous scheme, I think it was maybe a $25 break for nonprofits.
Right. And it includes everything, including small events, which were previously at $20 and or $40.
It does include everything, but the small events that are named on the schedule that's currently on the website right now, mm-hmm. most of those actually don't even require a special events permit. Okay. For example, Pin and Q parking lot events, the mall parking lot events, all those aren't based on, they're not being held on private property. So the schedule is quite old, and but it would include, for example, residential block parties if you're going to close the street.
Right.
I mean, that's the only time that a special events permit is really required for stuff like that.
All right, thank you.
Well, we did call for a public hearing. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing for a discussion and a motion.
I would move to approve Resolution 17-45, a resolution establishing an administrative processing fee for special event permits.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Franzen and seconded by Councilor Sweeney. All those in favor? And it passes unanimously. And that brings us then to ordinance number 17-27. And that staff report,
I'm over
Bailey,
here.
you got up there
I
while
know,
I was
I'm over
down
here now.
looking at my notes. There you are.
It feels weird to be on the wrong side. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So this is staff report WZC 17-16. The city is requesting a rezone on one parcel from County R3, which is a one-family residential zone, to WR1, which is the city's one-family residential zone. The parcel is located along Mountain Shadows Drive near the intersection with Birch Glen Road, and the parcel is now located within the city limits. So the purpose of rezoning the property is due to the adoption of Resolution 1725, which annexed the property into Whitefish city limits on July 17th of 2017. Since it's now within the city, we have to rezone it to a city designation instead of a county designation. So there was a comparison between the county R3 and the proposed WR1. That's on page 322 of your packet. If you wanted to compare the two zones to each other, they're relatively similar in size and setbacks. The subject property totals approximately 5.3 acres. It is currently developed with a single-family residence. The growth policy does identify this parcel as a suburban residential in our city-county growth policy future land use map. Typically, the zoning districts that apply to the suburban residential are the WCR, WER, and WSR. So I'll get into that discussion in a minute. But kind of some more general information. We did mail a notice to the adjacent landowners within 150 feet on September 1st. We also noticed advisory agencies and published a legal in the Whitefish pilot on September 6th. I've only received one comment, and that was right before the planning board meeting, and that was attached in their packet, and it's also been attached in your packet as well. And that just had some supporting documentation about the subdivision in general and kind of this property and future subdivision. So nothing specific to the actual zone change itself. Just over a couple criteria, pretty much the big one, the growth policy designation. So as I said, this is designated as a suburban residential designation in our future land use map, which is WCR, WER, and WSR. However, prior to the termination of the interlocal agreement, this property was zoned WLR, which also was not equivalent to the suburban residential zone. We've made a policy that any property that comes in to be annexed, it either reverts back to the zoning it was prior to the interlocal termination or our closest equivalent. In this case, the county didn't have a WLR, so they rezoned to their closest equivalent, which was their R3, and therefore we're rezoning it to our now closest equivalent, which is our WR1. There is water and sewer available along Mountain Shadows Drive. The proposed zoning includes setbacks. Any new building will have to conform to city codes and city standards. It is, as I said, now located in city limits. It's served by Mountain Shadows Drive. It is predominantly single-family residential in that area. It is developed, as I said, with a single-family house. The WR1 only permits single-family dwellings, so the surrounding buildings and character of that neighborhood should not change in any way with this. And so let me get back to my transmittal letter. We are recommending approval of the rezone. The Whitefish Planning Board held a meeting on September 21st and considered the request. There were no members of the public that spoke at that meeting on this item. And the Planning Board is also recommending approval of the rezone. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey?
Okay.
That opens the public hearing. Anyone from the public wishing to address ordinance 17-27? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I would do so once recognized.
Oh, sorry, yes. Councilor Fury.
No problem. I would move to approve ordinance 17-27 on a first reading, and that will approve WZC 17-16, adopting the findings of fact, relevant staff report as recommended to us by the Whitefish Planning Board.
I second.
It's been moved by Councilor Fury and seconded by Councilor Williams. All those in favor? And again, Michelle, it passes unanimously. The next is going to be ordinance 17-28, and that is Wendy.
Good evening. Okay, so I have a WZC 17-17. It's a zone change request by the City of Whitefish to remove an expired PUD over a project formerly known as Coldwater Basin. This is a housekeeping matter, and while you haven't seen any of these before, some case laws changed kind of around the country, and one of the proposals is part of our amended PUD that hasn't been adopted yet, but would have us come back for a rezone, for a PUD to eliminate a PUD to go back through the rezone process. So we were advised that we should start doing that kind of from here on out. So that's what this one and the next one are, two subdivisions that you folks had approved a number of years ago, or maybe even your predecessors, to remove the PUD from our zoning maps. So again, it's just kind of a housekeeping matter. So this project was formerly known as Coldwater Basin. So we're proposing to remove the expired PUD, because right now it has a PUD WLR zone, and it'll just go back to the WLR. The project, formerly known as Coldwater Basin, expired in 2013, and as part of that subdivision, you also approved a PUD overlay. So in order to remove the expired PUD overlay, the city has initiated this rezone to revert the property back to the original zoning. There's no development plans at all. This is a city-initiated zone change. The property is located excuse me, along Big Mountain Road, and it's about 27 acres. The property is designated as suburban residential in the growth policy. We also noticed adjacent landowners, advisory agencies, and placed illegal in the paper. We did receive one public comment from a neighbor who's concerned about what the future development is going to be. But again, with this particular request, there's no development proposal at all. So we review the criteria, or review zone changes according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. Kind of similar to the one Bailey just talked about, this one has a suburban residential designation, which is more along the lines of those larger lots, and this is WLR. But again, it's just a housekeeping matter, and we're just simply removing the PUD overlay. That's kind of the highlight, really, of all these, because again, there's really no development taking place, and at such time when development happens, and maybe any sort of future rezones will be a little more detailed in our review. So the planning board, they did hold a public hearing on September 21st, and they unanimously recommended approval. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing to discuss ordinance 17-28. Doesn't look like this one's very popular this evening either. Not seeing anyone approaching, rushing to the podium. I'll go ahead and close the public comment and turn that back to council for discussion and/or a motion. Councilor Sweeney.
Be happy to make a motion. I would move that we approve ordinance 17-28, an ordinance removing a plan unit development overlay on approximately 27 acres of land along Big Mountain Road known as Tract 2B in Section 12, Township 31 North, Range 22 West, Flathead County, reverting the property to the original zoning of Whitefish of WLR 1 Family Limited Residential, and adopting findings of fact.
I'll need a second.
I second.
And Councilor Williams has the second. All those in favor? Michelle, it passes unanimously. That brings us to item D, which will be ordinance 17-29. On first reading, that's on page 374 of your packets. And again, Wendy?
Yeah. So this is, again, excuse me, I'm trying to catch a cold, I think, is another request by the City of Whitefish to eliminate the PUD overlay on 12 parcels on the expired Lookout Ridge project. Right now it has a WPUD/WA and /WRR1 on it. All the parcels are located in the city limits. Again, this is another housekeeping matter. This project expired on June 21st of this year, and as part of the project, the council approved a PUD overlay. So again, to remove the expired PUD overlay, we've initiated a rezone to revert the property back to its original zoning of WA and WRR1. The property is over 200 acres, 228.5. The growth policy is both rural and resort residential, which is compliant with the zoning. And we did notice adjacent landowners, advisory agencies, and place illegal in the pilot, and we didn't receive any comments at all. And again, we review these according to the criteria in the zoning regulations, and similar to the other one, again, this is a housekeeping matter. We're simply removing an expired PUD overlay. So the planning board, again, met on September 21st, and they unanimously recommended approval. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions from council? Frank?
Wendy, have we got a bunch more of these coming over the next year or so, or?
I can think of at least one more.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad we're doing this.
Right,
Thanks.
yeah.
Any other questions for Wendy? Not seeing any. Thank you, Wendy. Now is the time for public comment. The hearing is open. Gosh, okay, not seeing anybody. We'll go ahead and close it and bring it back to council for discussion and/or a motion on ordinance 17-29. Jen?
I would move to approve ordinance 17-29, an ordinance removing a planned unit development overlay on approximately 228.5 acres of land along Big Mountain Road known as tracks 2C, 4, 5, 5AF, 5B, 5C, 5E, 6A, 6CB, 6CD, 6C, and 6D in Section 12, Township 31 North, Range 22 West of Flathead County, and reverting the property to its original zoning of Whitefish WA and WRR-1 and adopting the findings of fact.
I'll need a second.
I'll second.
Councilor Sweeney, so that's been moved by Councilor Franzen, seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Not seeing anybody wanting to have further discussion. All those in favor? And again, it passes unanimously. That brings us to the hearing on ordinance 17-30, page 396 of your packets. And that's still Wendy.
Yes. Okay, so this particular rezone is WZC 17-19. This is a request by 95 Caro LLC to rezone the site formerly known as Idaho Timber from WI to WIT, which is the Industrial Transition Zone, and WT3, which is the Neighborhood Mixed Use Transitional Zone. This zone change request is on Tract 1 of COS 9540 and is also part of the implementation plan of the Highway 93 West Corridor Plan that was approved by the council in 2005. Tract 1 is located at the north end of Caro Avenue and is bounded by the railroad to the north, Whitefish River to kind of the north and east, Veterans Peace Park to the west, and unimproved West First Street to the south. The project's located within the city limits. In my staff report, I put down the purpose and intent and kind of the different standards for both the WIT and the WT3. The property is located at 95 Caro Avenue. It's a little more than 14 acres. The properties are now the site of the closed Idaho Timber Mill. There's existing industrial buildings and hard surface paving. The growth policy identifies the parcels as industrial transitional and neighborhood mixed use transitional, which were the land uses designated in the Highway 93 West plan, which was an amendment to the growth policy. Under the Highway 93 plan, which again was adopted in 2015 after a couple of years of lots of extensive public process, this property was included as part of the corridor study as an opportunity for redevelopment. And through the lots of public process that happened, it was identified that lower intensity industrial and manufacturing uses with proximity to the railroad and access to the Whitefish River, which has become a major draw in recent years, was identified as important. Out of the public process, the plan identified 2 land uses and 2 zoning designations for the Idaho timber property to transition from heavy industrial uses to more mixed use and adaptive clean industries. So after the 2015 plan was adopted, the city council also approved these two zoning districts, the WIT and the WT3, and they came directly out of that plan. So staff, excuse me, noticed adjacent landowners, advisory agencies, and placed a legal in the paper. And before we went to planning board, we hadn't received any comments. We did receive some comments at planning board from Citizens for a Better Flathead, and I can talk about that in just a second. So again, like the other zone changes, we review these according to the criteria in the zoning regulations, and they also fall out of state law. So these are specific criteria for zone changes in particular. So the first one, made in accordance with the growth policy. So the growth policy was amended through that Highway 93 West plan, identifying the two different land uses, and that's exactly what these folks are doing. So the proposed zone change to WIT and WT3 are made in accordance with the Highway 93 West plan. Secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers. The properties are served by the City of Whitefish and City of Whitefish Police and Fire Departments. Promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. Public services and utilities are available to the property, and at the time of development, they'll be extended to serve the site. Facilitate adequate provision for transportation, water, sewerage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. Again, water and sewer are available, and the properties are adjacent to a city-maintained road which is paved. The school district will not be changed due to the requested zone change, and the property is located adjacent to the Veterans Peace Park, which is a privately owned and maintained park, and they're also adjacent to Grouse Mountain Fields and City Beach, or nearby. Reasonable provision for adequate light and air. The proposed zoning designation includes setbacks, maximum building heights, and lot coverage. And in addition, all future construction will conform to the building code. Effects on motorized and non-motorized transportation systems. Again, the properties are located in the city limits. They're served by Caro Avenue, which is a paved city-maintained road. Highway 93 West has a sidewalk, but it currently does not connect to this property. As the project develops and issues surrounding motorized and non-motorized transportation will be carefully reviewed. Promotion of compatible urban growth. Again, the Highway 93 West plan identified this area for a particular type of development, and the proposed zone change is going to promote compatible urban growth because they're served by services, and the zoning designations promote that plan. Consideration to the character of the district and its particular suitability for particular uses. The character of the district is predominantly industrial with single-family residential to the south. The Highway 93 West plan adopted by the council considered the character of the district and its particular suitability for the particular uses during its plan and zoning development. Conserving the value of buildings. The properties are kind of vacant industrial buildings and land, and the Highway 93 plan adopted by the council in 2015 considered the character of the district during plan and zoning development. Therefore, the value of the surrounding buildings will not be negatively impacted by the proposed zone change. Encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout the jurisdictional area. The proposed zone change encourages the most appropriate use of land because it will be implementing the Highway 93 West plan. And then finally, that historical use and established use patterns and recent changes in use trends will be weighed equally in consideration, not be given to one to the exclusion of the other. So the historical use of the property was high intensity industrial use. The proposed change to industrial transition considers the former use patterns and anticipates the trend toward light industrial and residential uses. So the planning board held a public hearing on September 21st. They unanimously recommended approval. At the public hearing, the applicant's representative spoke in favor of the request, and we did receive one letter, which is on page 435 of your packet, from Citizens for a Better Flathead. There were some questions that a lot of them are a little bit more geared towards the actual development and not the specific criteria for a zone change. And so those will be addressed as development progresses. And then I would just note too that the water quality regulations do apply to all zoning districts across the entire city. No one else spoke from the hearing, and again, the planning board unanimously recommended approval. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks again, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy?
I'd like to state that as a point of order, I have an indirect connection to the property that we're talking about through my employer as we rent the current building on the property. I will not recuse myself from the vote, but I just want to make it public knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you. No questions? We did ask for a public hearing. Is there any member of the public who would like to address council on this item? Ordinance 17-30. Bruce, your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Bruce Booty, landscape architect, 301 2nd Street. And I don't have much to add. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here as a representative of the current owners and would answer questions if there are any.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else in the public wish to speak this evening? Thanks for breaking the ice there, Bruce, but I don't see anybody else. And so I am therefore going to close the public hearing and turn it back to council for discussion and/or a motion. Andy?
Well, I'll put a motion out there. I would move to approve ordinance 17-30 on a first reading, and that will approve WZC 17-19, adopting the findings of fact staff report as recommended to us by our esteemed planning board.
I'll second.
Been moved by Councilor Fury, seconded by Councilor Franzen. Any discussion? Seeing no one wishing to discuss it further, I'll call, see if there's a vote. All those in favor? And it once again passes unanimously. Thank you, Michelle. And that was the last of the public hearings for this evening, but we do have a communication from the city attorney with regards to ordinance 17-31.
Good evening, again, Deputy Mayor and council members. My staff report starts on page 439. So it's just some general background. Police officers generally can't make arrests outside their jurisdiction. However, state law allows a municipality to authorize its police officers to make arrests within a 5-mile, and I hate to use the word donut, but I'm going to, donut area of its limits. To date, Whitefish hasn't passed such an ordinance. Instead, we've relied upon Montana statutory and case law exemptions to the general jurisdictional rule. And actually, my prosecutor, Christy Curtis, brought this to my attention and asked that I bring it before council just to expressly authorize our police officers to make arrests in this kind of donut area. We haven't had a lot of challenges to our jurisdiction, but jurisdictional challenges can take up some time and some of Christy's time. And the example that Christy and I just spoke about was, for example, people on Big Mountain Road, you know, pulling over DUIs on Big Mountain Road. Right now, we don't usually do it, but we'd like the, you know, ability just to rely upon that express Montana authority to make arrests. So the proposed ordinance just provides that the Whitefish Police Chief and city police officers have the authority to make arrests within the city's boundaries and within 5 miles of the city's boundaries. Again, this is more of a housekeeping item than anything. We don't anticipate it's going to make anybody's life really any different. It should also be noted that we adopted another subsection of Montana law years and years ago, which allows police officers the power to arrest people for disorderly conduct within 3 miles of city limits. It's a really weird statute. It's old. It was enacted during Prohibition. And so we do have that ordinance, but there's some good law out there in the form of Attorney General opinions that police can actually make arrests within 5 miles for a violation of state law, which prohibits offenses against public order. So that's kind of just an interesting clarification. So we don't anticipate there's going to be any significant financial impacts of authorizing the police officers to especially make arrests within 5 miles of city limits. Again, it's pretty much housekeeping. It's not going to really affect much, but it might foreclose some of Christie's time being spent on jurisdictional challenges. So unless you have any questions, staff respectfully recommends that the City Council adopt Ordinance 1731, I believe.
Does anyone on council have questions for Angie? Yes, Jen.
Just a quick one, Angie. This new ordinance that we would be applying, you don't see that interfering or causing any issues with the original or the one that I guess is still there for the 3-mile boundary, they're not conflicting in any way?
I don't think they are, Jen. I think although, and again, it's such an old statute, it was passed in 1921, it basically gave cities the authority to prohibit, disorderly conduct, and it was during Prohibition. I don't know why they did a 3-mile radius, but our police officers can still arrest people in that 5-mile radius for state law that prohibits offenses against public order.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, Jen?
With that, I would move to approve ordinance 17-31, an ordinance adding a new section to Chapter 1 of Title 5, Police Regulations of the Whitefish City Code, expressly authorizing Whitefish police officers to make arrests within 5 miles of city limits.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Franson, seconded by Councilor Sweeney to approve ordinance 17-31. All those in favor? It passes unanimously. That brings us to then our next item is communications from the city manager. Adam?
Yeah, so I think everyone has in their packet my latest memo. If you have any questions on that, let me know. I will do a public reminder that we're going to be doing Run, Lock, Fight training here at City Hall on Friday, October 13th. And we will be closing City Hall that day for the public because we're actually doing scenarios and live kind of drills and different things, and so it does take up City Hall, and it is quite active. And then, of course, we're going to be practicing, I see that it should say techniques in here, but we will be practicing the techniques that are taught. So as we can see, as things are in commotion out and about in the world, I think this training is very timely for us, now that we're in a new facility and just starting to get used to it. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Questions for Adam? Any other items arising between September 27th and October 2nd?
No, nothing significant.
All right. Consideration and direction to continue with the process to include the snow lot in the TIF district by first preparing an amendment to the downtown master plan. How's council want to weigh? Oh, yes.
Could I give a quick staff
Yes.
report, please? Okay.
Thanks, Dana.
Yes. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and City Council. My staff report is on page 442 of your packet. During my research and becoming a TIF expert, or trying to be, I determined that the snow lot that has been discussed with the Whitefish Strategic Housing Plan Task Force as a potential site for development of affordable housing has been identified in the 2015 master plan update as a parking lot. Prior to that, in the 2006 master plan, it was a high-density residential. So when going through the code to do all the changes to include the snow lot in the TIF boundaries, I determined that the planning board, according to state law, must review the modification to the Whitefish Urban Renewal Plan and must agree that it conforms with the city's growth policy. So we adopted the 2015 downtown master plan update with the city's growth policy. So we would need to start with making an adjustment there. I don't know that they would be able to say that it conforms without those changes. The zoning change, that property is not zoned currently for residential. It's currently warehousing and industrial. I'm not sure that that actually has to be changed beforehand, but I think it would be good to have it ready because I believe this is going to be one of the #1 items coming forward out of the Housing Task Force report that you'll have in November. I also outlined the steps to doing the modifications, so I won't read through those for you tonight, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Then I think we'll need a show of hands if we want to go forward and asking staff to walk through the steps as outlined on page 443 of our packet so that we can start moving this forward. Comments? Yes? Oh, we just need a show of hands unless somebody wants to discuss it further. All those who feel we should go forward as outlined? Looks like that's a go for it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to item 10 on the agenda, consideration of appointing 2 council members to the PUD working group, and I'll entertain some discussion there. Although I do understand that we have 2 volunteers.
That's what I understand as well. I will volunteer myself and Andy.
You'll volunteer, Andy?
Yep. And I think you jumped in first the other night, so I don't feel badly about it. But anyway, I think
Move the microphone.
anyway, I think that's probably the best thing for us to do. Unless somebody else has some interest, I'd be happy to relinquish my place in that spot, but I'll continue on if that's what you want.
Okay. Further comment? Andy?
Yeah, and then we discussed with the committee chairman potential participants from the committee. We haven't fully decided on anybody yet. They've been kind of going back and forth, so we'll hopefully have that ironed out here. And we may just work with possibly several of them, given time constraints that people have and that kind of thing. So we'll see where we're at.
Okay, but things are starting to congeal a bit. Anyone else have any further discussion or comment?
Yeah,
Yes.
Coagulate maybe might be a better word. Sure.
I would just say thanks for volunteering.
Yes.
This is one topic that feels a bit over my head, and so I appreciate you guys taking the time to really dig through it and help us understand it.
Okay, so with that, Councilor Fury and Councilor Sweeney will be the council representatives on the PUD committee. Dave, to work with you and other a couple other members of the community. Yes. Oh, sure. Those who think we should go forward with that and have Andy and Frank? Yes. Got it. Thank you. All right, that brings us then to councilor comments, and we'll start, Andy?
I guess just a couple. We, after our last council meeting, kind of going to come under our communications from volunteer boards, but the Wisconsin Avenue Corridor Study Committee met after our draft has been out and after we had our last public meeting, when the public came in and looked at our maps and all of that kind of stuff. And it kind of jogged my memory as we were looking at the zone change on the Idaho timber property. That particular piece of property and that corridor study was a topic of a lot of discussion. We have kind of hit that same point with the Wisconsin Avenue corridor study. The piece of property is obviously the turnoff to the big mountain, which is the 38 acres, Dave, 38 acres of property, along with the 700 feet of lakefront that has been accumulated by Mr. Joe Gregory. The tricky part of that piece of property is, even though it's zoned for high-density residential, it has always been called out in our growth policies and master plans as basically single-family zoning. So the tricky part of that is it just never got changed. There were, if everybody recalls, some people might here in the room, but there used to be a trailer court there, and so that's why it got the zoning that it got, and nobody ever looked at it. And so I think, you know, the community sentiment has obviously been that that's not a big commercial corner and built out to maximum density, and I think we've come up with a reasonable solution to take a look at that, and hopefully that will come out to the committee, and they're going to meet next week, Dave, is that, what's our, the 10th? 10th. Yeah, the 10th. And kind of that's sort of our last big piece that we have to look at, and at that point, then I think we'll be close to sending something off to the planning board. But what kind of jogged my memory about it, and I think, and I'm glad we're taking a little bit extra time to look at that, because it is an important piece of property. Seeing what happened with the Idaho timber property, we came up with a neighborhood plan, we came up with some zones that would go on that, and the property got acquired and immediately came to us, and we changed the zonings to what we had suggested. And I think a similar thing would happen on this particular piece of property, so hopefully with the corridor study we get it right. So we get what we want. So, anyway.
Thanks, Andy. Jen?
Quickly, so we don't leave Craig out of the mix here tonight. I was hoping that maybe we could get the fall leaf schedule posted online, if we know what that is or what we think that might be, if that can be updated online. I see the spring one, but not the fall.
No problem.
Katie?
I would like to encourage everyone to come out to Oktoberfest this Thursday. We are holding a fundraiser for the rebuild of the Sperry Chalet, and emergency service responders will be getting in for free +1. So it's good times to be had by all for a good cause.
Great, thank you. Frank? Pam?
Nothing tonight.
Well, I would have just two things. Those who are listening or watching on television, the apples are falling from the trees, and the bears are in town along with their babies, and so I encourage folks to pick up their apples, maybe make some cider, whatever it is they're going to do with them, but pick up the apples and it'll keep the bears safe. So that's my plea. And also this evening, I think it was just a wonderful experience, it certainly was for me, to recognize our first responders, both in the police department and the fire department, for their service to our community, to our city. And I want to thank them just one more time. So, Bridger and Joe, if you'll pass that along to them, I would be very appreciative. I think on behalf of the city and of the council. And with that, we are adjourned at 8:02.